A few years ago, I was doing some startups, and I had allocated too much equity to some of the people in the company, and I was having a hard time retracting it. So I wanted to write out an outline of what I thought should be done, the right way to do it. Because everything changes in a startup company. People come and go, people get fired, people decide to leave, you bring in cash, you bring in equipment, all kinds of things change, and there's no way ever to do it right in the beginning. So if you do a fixed model in the beginning, a fixed 50-50 split or 60-40 split, you're always going to run into problems. A fixed split is when two people go into business and issue equity at the outset, before the company starts. So three people go in, 33, 33, 33, that's a fixed split. A dynamic equity split, equity split kind of changes depending on the contributions people make. Different people in a startup contribute different things. The biggest one that people contribute is time. They contribute money, they can contribute intellectual property, relationships, equipment, supplies, all kinds of things go into a startup company. Each one of those things has a value relative to the other things. So my time may be relatively worth more or less than yours. What I do is I add what I call a theoretical value to each one of the different contributions. So your hourly rate, the amount of money you put in, the supplies, relationships you bring in, intellectual property, all those things have a theoretical value. So in order to do this dynamic equity split called a Grunt Fund, you simply add up the theoretical value of all the contributions that you made and divide it by the theoretical value of all the contributions that everybody made. 1 hour of my time as a professional entrepreneur is worth a different rate than someone right out of college. So what I call the relative value would be, what would someone have to pay me without paying me equity at all? So let's say a guy coming out of college today could make $50,000 a year. If I could just pay that person $50,000 a year, I wouldn't have to give them equity. But because they're taking the risk that they may never get paid, what I do is I double what I would normally pay them to account for the risk, and then I divide that number by 2,000 to roughly the number of hours in a year. So cash is king. Cash is always the most important thing to a startup, so it should receive the biggest incentive to people to put in money. So if I put in 5 hours of my time or 10 hours of my time at $1,000, the $1,000 cash is worth a lot more to the startup company because I can buy things with it. So I have to give extra pie, extra incentive, extra equity in order to reflect the fact that I'm risking my cash. It's much harder to get someone to part with cash than it is to get them to part with a few hours of their time. Dynamic splits aren't widely used because they're not widely understood. I'm hoping to change that with this book. Noam Wasserman's research pointed this out, and this problem is coming to the surface, and people are realizing there's a better way out there to do it. And it's been surprising to me that there hasn't been more structured thought into how to make this work. People try to mitigate the damage through vesting programs and option programs and things which sort of work, and they can be very valuable, but they don't address the core problem is that when you and I go into business together 50-50, you own that equity. And if I do all the work, it's always a negotiation to get out of it. So the dynamic equity split allows for all those changes, all those things that could happen, and make it always amicable when you're doing the deal. So it's always a nice way to start.